Downtown Decatur, it's the Faber Files. Hello, I'm your host, Bill Faber. Because democracy demands debate, we present this program of public issues and interests in our community. The only show on broadcast TV and radio where there's extensive interviews, conversations, and events of interest in our local community. Tonight, storytelling at Wildflour Bakery at 256 West Main Street here in Decatur. Imagine Halloween night. The bonfire is roaring. Your mom and dad are on the log sitting next to you, roasting hot dogs or marshmallows. The wind blowing through the trees. It's time for a story. Nothing in human communication, the way we talk, relate, and remember our past and our present, nothing more powerful can be conveyed than by a story. And we'll have a two-part presentation of storytelling, master storytellers who are practicing their trade right here in Decatur. First is Linda Dust, a master storyteller from Assumption, Illinois, part one of our series. Part two will be Dan Kettig, along with Linda Dust, telling master stories and then singing along together in duets on their Irish instrument and the guitar. Enjoy this evening of storytelling, stories about our human nature, our present, and our past. Thanks for watching.
And welcome to the Wildflour Bakery and Cafe. I'm Linda Dust, and together with Dan Kettig, we're going to tell you some stories and sing you some songs and give you a good evening to go home and tell your folks about. There was a man in Ireland. He was a farmer and he was poor. He was poorer than poor. And he had 3 sons. And like all fathers, he wanted more for his children than he had had growing up. But he didn't have any money, and he knew the only way for them to improve themselves was through education. And the only way he could think of to pay for that education was to sell his soul to the devil. And he did. All 3 sons went off to school, and they all had wonderful careers. The oldest son made the entire village proud, and he became a priest. Such an honor to have a priest come from your village. The second son became a doctor. He was known across the land for his ability to diagnose and to heal. The third son became a lawyer. It's a job. By and by, the man grew old, and it was time for him to pay his price. The devil showed up as he was laying on his sick bed with his son, the priest, beside him. The devil said, "It's time to collect my debt." And the priest said, "You know, we know that he made his deal with you, and we can't stop that, but we love him so much. You're going to have him for all eternity. Can't we keep him a little longer?" Well, the devil's not above exercising a little positive PR, so he said, "Yeah, a year. I'll give you a year." What's a year when it comes to eternity? And he disappeared. The old man got better. And he enjoyed that year with his sons and their families. But a year later, he again got sick, and he was again on his deathbed. This time, his son, the doctor, was with him. The devil showed up and said, "Come on, it's time to go." And the doctor said, "Look, I know we can't ask you anymore. You've been more than generous, but we love him so. 6 months more, please." Well, the devil was a little testy. He said, "All right, 6 months, but that's it. No more." He disappeared. The man got better, and they enjoyed that 6 months with him. But 6 months later, to the day, he was again at death's door. The devil showed up in his room, and his son, the lawyer, was with him this time. And the lawyer said, "Look, I just got here. I just want enough time to tell my father goodbye and tell him how much I love him. Could I just have that?" The devil says, "Well, how long will that take you?" He says, "This candle, till this weak candle burns out. Just till that candle burns to the bottom." Yes, so it was only about this big. "And no time, no minute more." "Absolutely," said the lawyer. The devil said, "All right, you have till that candle burns to the bottom." The lawyer smiled, and he picked up the candle and blew it out and stuck it in his pocket. The moral of that story is it takes a lawyer to beat the devil.
Like that one.
I have lots of lawyers in my family, and that's one of their favorite stories. This story comes from Slovakia, and it's called Strawberries in Egypt. There was a young girl named Mariska. She lived in a house near the edge of town with her father and her mother, and everything was fine until her mother died. Now the father and daughter got along well enough, but he really thought he should give his daughter a stable home. She deserved a mother. And he began to see a widow in town who also had a daughter, and he thought, this is even better. I'll give my daughter a sister. And he and the widow were married. Mariska had a sister named Lucy. All was fine. Mariska had a beautiful bedroom upstairs full of light. She and Lucy shared all the chores. Everything was just going splendidly until her father died. And everything changed. Mariska's beautiful, sunny bedroom became Lucy's bedroom. Mariska had a room behind the kitchen. The chores that Lucy used to help her with, Mariska did all of them. But oddly enough, even though Mariska worked so hard, she was still the most beautiful thing in that house. Young boys would come to call on Lucy, and one look at Mariska, and it was, Lucy who? Well, this didn't sit well with the stepmother at all. And she decided that Mariska had to be done away with. One day while she was working in the kitchen, Lucy came down the stairs and said, Mariska, Mother has purchased for me that beautiful blue gown in the window of this dressmaker. And I'm going to wear it next week, but I would like violets to twine in my hair. It would set it off perfectly. It would set off my blue eyes. Lucy said to Mariska, it's January. It's winter. There's cold and snow everywhere. There are no violets. Well, the stepmother had been standing behind the door, and she jumped out at her stepdaughter and grabbed her and said, your sister wants violets, and violets she shall have. And with that, she opened the door and shoved her out into the cold with not even a hat or gloves to keep her warm. And behind the closed door, she heard her stepmother say, don't come back without them or we will beat you. Mariska didn't know what to do. She thought, oh, I'll look and see if there's anything in the woods. And she was out and she was freezing cold. And she noticed a bonfire on the top of the hill. So she climbed the hill hoping to get warm from the fire. And there were 12 huge stone chairs. And sitting in those chairs were 12 people. There were 3 young people, 3 adults, 3 middle-aged, and 3 older people. And Mariska knew who they were. They were the months of the year. And sitting at the largest chair was January, with his long, white, silky hair and his ice blue eyes. Mariska entered the circle and curtsied and asked if she might warm herself by the fire. And January said, certainly, child, go ahead. And after she had thawed herself out, January said, what's your name, child? Said Mariska. Said Mariska, why are you out in the woods, in the cold, with no clothing, not even a coat? She told about how her stepsister Lucy wanted violets. January laughed. There are no violets in winter. There is cold, there is snow, there is ice. But there are no violets. She said, I know. They said if I come back without them, they'll beat me. January looked over at March. For March, come forward, please, he said. March approached and he handed him the scepter he'd been holding. March took the scepter of the air and wondered. Snow thawed out, the ground turned green, and there were violets everywhere. She gathered as many as she could. March said, hurry, child, I can't hold this long. And she filled her apron with violets. She curtsied and thanked them for all their help and hurried back home. When she walked through the door, her stepmother was there and said, I told you not. Where did you get those violets? Well, There were a few left in the forest, she said. Lucy grabbed them all from her, and she made chains, and she wove them in her hair. She didn't even offer one to Mareshka. A few days later, Lucy came down the stairs again and said, Mareshka, I would like strawberries for my lunch. Lucy, said Mareshka, look outside. There's snow, there's ice, there's winter everywhere, but there are no strawberries in winter. Again, the stepmother was hiding nearby, and she reached out and she pinched Mareshka this time. Your sister wants strawberries, she'll have them. And out the door she went. And if you come back without them, they said through the door, we will beat you. Off she went. She made a pretense. She tried to see if there might be some somewhere, but to no avail. She ended up back up on that hill. She curtsied and asked again if she might share the warmth. January said, certainly, child, but he didn't smile quite as big. He says, what does Lucy want now? Strawberries, she said. There are no strawberries in winter, he said. I know, but if I go back without them, they will be eaten. Sister June, January said, come forward. June took the scepter, and she held it in her hand, and the air warmed, the snow dissolved, the grass turned green, the violets came and went, the buds on the trees came and went, and then there were strawberries, big strawberries that smelled so good it made Mareshka's mouth water. Her child, said June, gathered them quickly. She filled her apron with those strawberries, curtsied, and thanked everyone for their help, and then went back to the house. She couldn't even get all the way through the door before Lucy had grabbed all the strawberries for them. She let her mother have a few, but there were none left for Mareshka. Mareshka just went into her room and cried. The next night, Lucy again came in and told her sister, I would like apples for my supper. Oh, Lucy, she said, there are no apples. Again, the stepmother was hiding. This time she slapped her. My daughter wants apples for her supper. Apples she shall have, and if you don't get them, don't come back. Again she went. She looked through the apple orchard to see if there might be any on that tree, but no. And again, back up on the hill, January didn't smile at all this time. He said, what does Lucy want this time? Mareshka hung her head. Apples, she said. She wants apples. Brother September, please come forward. September came forward. The snows melted, the air warmed, the trees budded and bloomed, and the leaves fell from the trees, and there were apples all over the trees. And Lucy reached to get them, and January said, only two. You may take only two. She nodded in agreement and put an apple in each pocket. Curtsied and thanked everyone and headed back. This time, when she got in, Lucy grabbed the apples and took a bite out of one and said, oh, Mother, I've never, ever had an apple this delicious. It's wonderful. Here, you try this one. And she looked at Mareshka and said, where's the rest of them? I could only find two, she said. Liar, you were just too lazy. Again, Mareshka just went to her room. She didn't know how long she could take this behavior. But then Lucy said, Mother, if she found two, think of how many more we could get, because no one can say no to us. We'd have enough to keep us in apples the rest of the season and sell them at the market for a pretty fair profit. So they dressed up in warm boots and heavy cloaks, and mittens and scarves. They were well prepared for winter, and out the door they went, and they followed Mareshka's footprints till they came to the top of that hill. They looked at all the people sitting in the chairs, but just ignored them and walked up to the fire, and without so much as a by your leave, began to warm themselves. January was not smiling. He said, what are you looking for, Lucy? Now Lucy was so self-involved, she hadn't even noticed that this stranger knew her name. She turned around and looked at him, and she said, nothing we can't get for ourselves, old man, if it's any of your business. January just nodded. and Lucy and her mother made their way trying to find the apple orchard. In January, Joss looked after them, and his eyes became paler and paler and more icy as he squeezed that second, and the temperature dropped, and the wind rose, and the snow came down in buckets. Oreshka waited for her sister and stepmother for a long time, but they never came back. And some people say that she married a farmer and she was able to grow the most beautiful fruits and vegetables anyone had seen in that town. Others say she moved to town and married one of the local boys. Whichever was her fate, it was certainly far easier and more comfortable than what befell her stepmother and her stepsister. And that's the story of Strawberries in Winter from Slovakia. I've been thinking a lot about lullabies. I don't know why. Missing the grandkids, maybe. Friends of ours are expecting their first child pretty soon, and I was going through some books, and I came across this song. It's very old. Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee all through the night. Guardian angels, God will send thee all through the night. Soft the drowsy hours are sleeping, till and veil in slumber sleeping. I, my loving vigil keeping, all through the night. Guardian angels ever round me, all through the night. In my slumber crawls around me, all through the night. Soft the drowsy hours are creeping, hill and dale in slumber sleeping. I, my loving vigil keeping, all through the night. Sometimes this song or this story is told in the fall, but it's pretty much good for any year round. It's called Wicked John. And it comes from the Appalachians. There was Smith named John. John had a reputation. He could swear curses that no one else could even think of. John was a drunkard. He was mean as a snake and twice as ugly. But there was one thing, one redeeming quality that John had, and that was hospitality. He would never turn anybody away from his door that was hungry or in need. And he was working in his forge one day, and this poor old crippled up man showed up. I mean, this man was so hobbled over, he had to use 2 canes. He was just about double over. And John looked up and saw him standing at the doorway and says, "Well, old man, why don't you come in and rest yourself on this chair? Come on, old man." You know, and he helped him down. And he says, "Well, I was just about ready to break for lunch. How about I bring you something as well?" The old man just nodded. John went back and he fixed them each great big sandwiches with big slabs of ham. He brought them each a big old apple, and even went to the well and brought up 2 big cold glasses of milk. It was a feast. He brought the food out to the old man, and he says, "Old man, it's good enough for me. It'll be good enough for you. Now you just sit there and eat it." And they sat in companionable silence, eating their food. When they got done, the old man began to stand up, and it was kind of odd. That bent over misshapen body seemed to just start rising and rising, and those crippled up shoulders had sprouted wings. I mean, the next thing John knew, there was this man standing in his forge with a long white robe and a gold belt, and keys hanging off that belt. John just looked at him and said, "Who the hell are you?" He said, "Well, I'm not surprised you don't recognize me, John. I'm St. Peter. I don't reckon they see you in church too often." He says, "But once a year, I come down to earth and I wander around and I give people the opportunity to treat me right. And if they do, I'll give them 3 wishes. And John, you've got 3 wishes. And I want you to think about these because this is your chance to do some good." And John started laughing. 3 wishes, huh? Let me think about that, he said. I know. He said, "You see that rocking chair over there? Here's the guy. That's my favorite chair in the whole world. There's nothing I like better than at the end of a long day to sit in that chair and just rock. But wouldn't you know it, every time I want to go sit in that chair and relax some other fool sitting in there. Now I want you to fix that chair so that if someone sits in there without my permission, that chair will hold them fast and rock back and forth as hard as it can until I say, let them go." Peter looked at John and said, "John, what kind of a wish is that?" "That you said I got 3 wishes, that's what I want." "It's so. Next wish. Now, John, do yourself some good. Think about your immortal soul." He looked around and he says, I know. You see this hammer? This is my favorite hammer. Fits my hands just the right way. But you know, when those children get out of school, they come by, they grab that hammer, run over to the field across, and they start playing hammer toss with it. I want you to fix that. So anybody picks that up without my permission, that hammer holds fast to their hand and it starts counting and it won't let go till I say let go. Are you sure about this, John? Said Peter. Yeah, I'm sure. All right, it's so. Now, John, you've got 1 more wish. Think about this. Think about your life. 1 wish. Let me think, said John. He smiled. So you see that bush there? It's a sticker bush. Yeah. Well, it blooms. It has the prettiest flowers. But those fox hunters, every time they come through, they'll grab a stick out of there and strip it and use it for a whip. And pretty soon, there's nothing left of it. I want anybody that grabs a switch out of that bush to be pulled down into the bush and held fast till I say let go. John, are you sure? Think about this. You said they were my wishes, did you? Yes, I did. All right, John, it's so. And Peter disappeared. Oh, John was bad before. There was nothing to how he was now. He'd start drinking on Saturday night and not stop until next Saturday mornings. He was meaner than he'd ever been. Oh, people talked about the way that man talked and the way he behaved. But, you know, you can't outlive the devil or your faith. And eventually, he was getting older, but the devil had heard stories. You know, he's getting worse every year. If we wait till he dies of natural causes, he may take this place over. So he sent one of his smaller imps, one of his children, up to take him back. He says, "Well, old man, my daddy sent me to come get you, so come on, let's go." He says, you're going to be down here sooner or later, so you might as well come now. John looked at the imp and said, all right, son, but I've got a job to finish. He says, so you sit in that chair and wait for me when I'm done with this job. So that imp sat in that chair, and that chair held him fast, and it started rocking back and forth till the top of the chair was hitting the ground, and the poor little imp's nose was smacking the ground in the other one. Finally he says, Mister, let me get stop! He says, boy, I'll make it stop if you promise never to come back here. I promise! And that chair stopped, and that imp went throwing him through the air and disappeared in a puff of smoke on his way. Well, when he got back down to hell, he says, Daddy, I'm not going back there. That man's really mean. Yeah, I should have known you were too small. So he sent one of the teenagers, because you know they already know everything. So the teenage devil showed up. He said, come on, old man, I'm not taking any guff off of you. Dad says it's time for you to come down to hell, and you're coming now. He says, that's fine, sit in that chair. No, I heard about your chair. I'm not sitting in any chair in this place. He said, all right, but I have to finish this job. And he was working on a wheel, and he had the wheel set, and he said, you know, son, if you grab that hammer and help me, it would go a lot faster. And he did. And that hammer started bouncing all around that forge, but that devil held fast to it, and finally he screamed, Mister, make it stop! And he said, you promise never to come back here? I promise! And he was gone in a puff of smoke. Well, the devil said, you know, I should have known better than to send the kids to do a man's job. So he went. He says, come on, old man. I'm not messing around. It's time. You got to come with me. John looked at him and said, who's going to make it? The devil said, I will, by golly. And they took to scrapping, and they wrestled, and they fought, and they pinched, and they gouged all over that forge. It was a pretty matched fight. And finally, they both broke loose and got a breath, and the devil spotted that sticker bush. He said, I'll show him what's what. Yeah, he grabbed a switch, pulled him down in the middle of that bush, and the harder he fought, the worse it was. And finally he says, make it stop. He said, do you promise never to come back? I promise. You can bank on it. And the devil disappeared in a puff of smoke, and John laughed. But it wasn't terribly many years later when John finally did die. And he walked up to the gates of heaven. And Peter looked at him and said, John, what are you doing there? He said, well, Pete, I know I haven't earned my way here, and I don't expect you to let me in, but I thought you might just open the door and let me look inside a little bit. No, John, I can't do that. All right, it's worth a try. And he turned around and he walked down the road. All the way down the hill, till the little imp sighted him coming from quite a ways away. He said, Daddy, Daddy, he's coming. The devil says, shut the doors, he'll ruin hell for all of us. So he slammed the doors, and John got to the gates of hell, and he said, well, where am I supposed to go? They wouldn't take me up the other place. The devil said, I don't care, but you can't stay here. And then he put a lump of coal in a bucket and handed it out to John. He says, here, you go somewhere else and start your own hell. So John went with this bucket, and he's still walking around. You see him a lot. You guys, you've seen him, haven't you? You see him in the fall a lot. That's because he goes by another name, Jack, a lantern.